Hello everyone, this is a bit odd, isn't it? I suppose I should explain this quickly to both people who are here because of DIO and people who might be here because they're just fans of the channel. Obviously this is not what we normally do. We have a large precedent for tier lists, certainly, and I've talked about DIO on the channel before, but obviously it's not what we do, you know. The furthest we strayed from Deep Rock Galactic, which is what we normally cover, is the podcast on Halo. Even then, we made a lot of comparisons to Deep Rock, and still very gaming related. DIO is just completely different, and it's because the videos that we normally do on Saturday, I very much so prefer to do with Tyler, which are usually either some kind of Deep Rock tier list, or what we do now, which is Deep Reddit Galactic, where we look at the Deep Rock Galactic subreddit and look at different posts to try and gain some community insight, offer feedback, and make fun of people. And we also do the update retrospective now, where we look back over past updates in a chronological order, sort of evaluate the impact on the game and sort of just give our thoughts on them. Tyler isn't with us today, or with me today, so I thought that for the Saturday video, assuming he's not going to get back from where he is in time for us to record one of those, but I should do something completely different. And my mind immediately turned to some kind of tier list, possibly Bloons Tower Defense is something that I've talked about on the channel, as well as, oh shit, what was the other thing? Some kind of Hades tier list for the game Hades. But this morning I settled on DIO because I've always wanted to put my thoughts out there when it comes to DIO's albums, and I'm going to do that. So this is all of Ronnie James Dio's studio albums. Ronnie James Dio being, of course, as we know, the best singer of all time, certainly the best heavy metal singer of all time, one of the gods of heavy metal, and who is obviously better than Ozzy. But this is probably about 95% of Dio's studio discography throughout the many different bands he's in, because obviously the debut Elf album isn't in this tier list, which is fine. I don't feel too strongly about that. I'm not concerned that it's not here, and it doesn't, obviously it had an impact on him, but it's not really reflected in any way for me throughout the rest of his music, except for the song Nevermore, only because it teeters on more of an epic tone, which a good deal of Dio's music does do that. But this is every Dio studio album in chronological order from the bands Rainbow, Black Sabbath, and Dio, of course. Black Sabbath included with the Heaven and Hell band, because they're basically the same. It's just the renamed version of Sabbath with Dio as the frontman, which is the better version of Sabbath. Anyway, what else can I really say before we get started? I suppose I should say I know a fair bit about Dio. He's a person whose life I take a great deal of interest in, whose work I take an even greater interest in. He's an inspiration for me, creatively, certainly. And as an individual, I've read the biography, I've listened to pretty much all of his music. Not every live album, I don't think, although I tend to prefer studio albums to live albums, which might be an unpopular opinion. I'm not into live music. But I'd be willing to say that I'm probably the biggest Dio fan of my generation in England, which isn't, I don't know if that's a huge claim or not, but I feel fairly confident in it. I haven't really met any other Dio fans. I've almost converted Tyler, or at least I think it's just because he's bored of the music he normally listens to, that he's moved on to mine, and he doesn't hate Dio, which is great. I consider that a conversion. Either way, let's get started. So we've been ranking them from S, A, B, C, D, standard tiers. Bit weird, you could be like, oh, D for Dio. No, D is obviously the lowest tier, and I'm not going to add any more. I don't think a single Dio album is bad. There is a worst. I'm not sure if they'll find a best. I think there is a worst album, and we'll get to it. Let's just jump straight in with the Rainbow debut album, which I think is just titled Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, which is a bit, There was a time when Ronnie wanted to call it Ritchie Blackmore and Ronnie Dio's Rainbow, which bit unwieldy of a title. Either way, I'll probably also be able to offer a little bit of what Dio himself thought of these albums. I've watched a lot of interviews and of course read the biography, Rainbow in the Dark. And I'll also say what I think is the best song from each album, personally. But yeah, the debut Rainbow album is absolutely fantastic, and it's something that Ronnie himself was quite proud of. He thinks it's a great album too, and I couldn't agree more. It's basically hit after hit, but it's not particularly hard, you know. There's very few rockers on it, and it's not heavy metal, it's rock, almost classical rock. I don't really know if that's, I don't know how correct that is. It's more rock than metal though, certainly. It's definitely not heavy metal. But it would be a sin for me to put it any lower than A. I'm not sure I can call it S. I'm not sure if any of the Rainbow stuff really climbs to that degree. Because I wouldn't say there's anything on the Rainbow album that blows me away. I just think it's just full of great songs, you know. Man on Silver Mountain is pretty iconic to me, at least. 16th Century Greensleeve, Self-Portrait, Catch the Rainbow, even Snake Charmer, which I don't, you know, have as a liked song on Spotify. Even that I quite enjoy. And of course, the best song on this album is undoubtedly Temple of the King. It's in my opinion, almost unrivaled epic. It's very melodic, it's very soft at times, but also very whimsical and epic. Despite how soft it is, it does feel very grand and very fantastical, and I just appreciate that. It's an S-tier song for sure, but this isn't... The point is that why I'm not putting an S is probably because it's just not necessarily my kind of music, like through and through. As much as I love songs like Temple of the King and a lot of the other songs on this album, it's not my go-to style of music, and that's why I'm not putting it in S. It's but it is still a damn good album, I must say. Rainbow Rising is the second album that Ronnie did with Rainbow, and it's another great one, I think. Well, I mean, it's pretty good, right? I think Ronnie has said some strange things about it, that he does like it, although he said something about the B-side being a bunch of self-absorbed crap. I'm not exactly sure what he meant there. Either way, it's got some great stuff on it, but overall, I think it falls quite a bit short of the first album. The only exception to this, and the only thing that really brings it up for me, well, it's got a few good rockers, like Do You Close Your Eyes and Starstruck. They're both quite a lot of fun to listen to, and are much more modern than a lot of what you find on the first Rainbow album. But what really seals the deal is Stargazer, which might not surprise you. Stargazer is truly epic. It's in the sort of Holy Diver, Heaven and Hell category, you know, as the song's Holy Diver and Heaven and Hell. It sort of sits up there with those. I mean, Stargazer oftentimes feels almost more epic. It's certainly more whimsical and more evolving. Or maybe Heaven and Hell evolved quite a bit as a song, but Stargazer I almost can't get enough of, and yet I can't listen to it all the time. But it's still an incredible song, easily S tier. But the album itself, like I said, falls short. It's only really got two other songs that I like, and even then, they don't come close to Stargazer itself. The rest of the album I also don't really care for. So I think I've got to put in B just because it provides like such an incredible song in Stargazer, and it's still very listenable overall. I wouldn't say I don't enjoy any of the tracks. I can enjoy them all. That's not the same for a certain other album we'll be talking about later. But the rest of it is fairly average to me. But it is still Dio, and Stargazer exists, which is just too good to ignore. It's a bit of a similar situation for Long Live Rock and Roll, except I think the two songs on this album that I like are pretty excellent in their own right. You know, it's Kill the King and Gates of Babylon. I think Kill the King is a lot better than Do You Close Your Eyes and Starstruck. But I don't necessarily think Gates of Babylon is as good as Stargazer. And again, I don't really care about the album beyond these 2 songs, which is why realistically I think I'm probably going to place it lower than Rising. I'm not sure exactly how I feel about that. I think Gates of Babylon is a really cool song. Same with Kill the King. But I think both of them are a fair bit worse still than Stargazer. And they're the only 2 songs on this album that I really care about. So if I'm being truthful to myself, Long Live Rock and Roll definitely is not preferable to me out of a lot of the other albums I'm probably going to put in B tier. So I think I'll leave it at C for now. Still, not the worst album that Dio could have gone out on for Rainbow, but I know that tensions were high at the time, and yeah, I mean, it turned out pretty decent. It's just not one of my favourites. Next is a prehistoric album, of course. It's Heaven and Hell, Dio's first go with Sabbath, Black Sabbath, replacing Ozzy, who is the worst singer. Not the worst singer, just worse than Dio, obviously, right? Heaven and Hell is a difficult one for me. It's a really difficult one, actually. There's a few songs that I do like on it, a few songs that I find quite memorable, like Die Young, Neon Nights, Children of the Sea, but they're just about decent for me. The rest of the album does not strike me in any particular way either, but, of course, we have the title track, Heaven and Hell, which is just, honestly, when I first listened to Heaven and Hell, I actually thought, oh, I don't like this kind of riff, this down, oh, actually, I kind of forgot it was, down, 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 down. I remember that part though, obviously, but I remember first listening to it and I thought, this is a very unsatisfying riff to me. Oh, how foolish I was, because Heaven and Hell, the song, is a masterpiece of almost unrivaled proportions. It's actually insane how good that song is. It's beyond S tier. It's actually quite a bit beyond S tier as a song. Heaven and Hell is fucking immaculate as a song. How much that is doing for the album, for me, I'm not sure, because it's really only that song that I truly care about. Like I said, there is a few others I remember, but not really that I care about, to be honest. It's really just Heaven and Hell for me. But I think it's so good. I think that song is so good that I can at least put this album in B, despite the fact that I don't care about the rest. It's a very high quality album, by the way. Don't get me wrong. Heaven and Hell is a historic album, and every song is of high quality. I just only really enjoy Heaven and Hell itself, and the title track. But it is a masterpiece. It's one of the best songs ever made. So it's at least B tier. It balances it out, I think, where I find the rest of the album mostly forgettable, but one song is so good that it counteracts everything else. I believe that. So B tier is where it would go. To be honest, I'm not sure if Heaven and Hell was just as forgettable as the rest if I put it below B tier, because it's such a high quality album and a very strong start, I think, for Dio in Sabbath. But at the same time, like I said, I do find the rest of it fairly forgettable for me, and I know that's probably going to be an unpopular opinion, but it is my opinion. Anyway, moving on to The Mob Rules, an album which I just listened to. I might have listened today, just before recording. Not for the first time. I've listened to it before. I think I've listened to it maybe twice before, or once, and I wasn't impressed. I thought, this is a painfully average album. I was wrong. I was very wrong. Ronnie himself actually thinks of this as quite an underrated album, and I think I have to agree. I think it's actually better than Heaven and Hell as an album. I don't think there's any song that even comes close to Heaven and Hell itself. But overall, I think it's actually a much better album, and I was caught off guard by quite a lot of the songs. I really like Voodoo. I really like Country Girl. Even Silent of the Southern Cross is pretty good. It's not really the kind of epic that I like from Dio. The Mob Rules itself is a very fun track. It's just got a great tone to it. Even Turn Up the Night, which has got a very abstract, optimistic tone, but it still doesn't necessarily feel optimistic, is also a pretty cool song. But for me, what really brings it home is Falling Off the Edge of the World, which I thought was an amazing track, a very much so an A tier track, probably not S tier, but I really did enjoy that. At the same time, I probably wouldn't rate any other tracks as highly as that, and I wouldn't give Falling Off the Edge of the World the same credit I give something like Stargazer or Heaven and Hell. Which means, once again, Mob Rules is probably going to place at B. I think it's probably got... It's got a lot going for it, but it doesn't reach the heights that... It doesn't really reach the heights that pretty much any of the other albums do that have greater heights. It's just a pretty good across-the-board album with quite a few bright spots, actually. And no real bruises, as it were. There's nothing that really brings it down, but not much that really brings it up. And my opinion has changed from painfully average to enjoyably average / great, actually. But I think B is probably where Mob Rules belongs more than any of them, really. Anyway, next up is, of course, we move to the 80s, when Dio was forced out of Sabbath for very odd reasons. I don't want to get into that, but Dio goes on to, of course, form his own band, self-titled band, but not solo project, Dio, which is, of course, going to make up the bulk of this video, starting with Holy Diver. Now, don't let anyone tell you anything else apart from this. Holy Diver is a masterpiece of an album, right? And I'm just going to put it straight up in this. I'd be surprised if there's a stronger debut album for any band. This is just mind-blowing, right? Every single song is a 9 out of 10, except, and this is going to annoy people, except Don't Talk to Strangers, which I'd give an 8, and Shame on the Night, which I give a 7. Shame on the Night is still a pretty cool song, but it's not really what I'm looking for, and it's nowhere near as good as the rest. Don't Talk to Strangers was actually the first Dio song I heard, and it got me into Dio. But then I did realise it's actually, for me, one of the weaker songs on the album. I think it has one of the strongest sections of the entire Dio discography, but it doesn't follow that up. It doesn't bring back the best part of the song towards the end. If it did, it would be probably my favourite song. Unfortunately, it doesn't do that, and it chooses to repeat its weaker elements instead of its strongest element. Either way, like I said, I think Holy Diver is a masterpiece. I think that song is a masterpiece. I think so many other songs in this album are. I think Rainbow in the Dark is an incredible pop song, which Dio credits like the success of his band to, basically. It's the name of the book. He understands its importance, even though he wasn't a fan of how poppy it was. Caught in the Middle is a fantastic, the optimistic song that I just enjoy over and over again. Straight Through the Heart is awesome. Stand Up and Shout is also great. Gypsy is fucking fantastic. Invisible is possibly the best song ever recorded. Actually, I won't say that. Invisible might be my favourite song ever. But it's probably not the best song ever recorded. And the Joe Barresi remix of Invisible is even better, which is ridiculous. It's also not on Spotify, unfortunately. It's in some Holy Diver special edition. Either way, Holy Diver is absolutely fucking fantastic. One of the best debut albums ever, easily. I don't see how it couldn't be. I mean, my knowledge of music isn't that vast, to be fair. Even my knowledge of metal music, which is what I subscribe to as my favourite genre, certainly. Even that, my knowledge isn't that vast. But Holy Diver is just so damn good. It's sort of epic and like bombastic and punchy and just a whole bunch of fun at the same time, and in all the right ways. It really doesn't miss, because even the Shame on the Night, which I do consider a little bit of a miss, it's also the final track of the album, and you've had so much fun before that point that it really doesn't matter. Anyway, let's move on from Holy Diver, because I'm not sure what else I can say. All I can do is really suck it off, just throw it in this praise its way that it doesn't really need. I think everyone understands how fantastic of an album it is. But Last in Line, which is an album that is actually very similar to Holy Diver in a lot of ways. I think these two are not interchangeable, but very, very comparable. Dio definitely considers it to be sort of like Holy Diver, maybe a little bit softer, he also said though that he might actually think it's a little bit better. That I can't agree with. I think it's up there. It's in the top 5 Dio band albums, right? But for me, it's a little bit worse. This is going to sound weird. It's a little bit worse in every way than Holy Diver, right? But it's still very close in every way at the same time. As in every track on... I actually think that Last in Line is probably more consistently good, because for me it has nothing that falls a little bit short of the rest. It's much more consistent to me, because but that's mainly because Holy Diver has Shame on the Night. But I don't think there's a single bad... I don't think there's a single belong... Basically, I said, like, Shame on the Night is maybe a 7 out of 10. I think every song on Last in Line is at least an 8 out of 10. So yeah, that's how I feel about it. Which means I'll probably give it an A tier. I think it probably is better than the original Rainbow album, but unfortunately, like I said, I think it does actually fall short of Holy Diver in basically every way, just only slightly. But I think probably enough to bring it down to A instead of S. Nevertheless, a fantastic heavy metal album that I do actually kind of adore. And I do like it more than Rainbow. I'm sort of feeling like, oh, maybe I should put an S. I think I'll leave it an A tier for now, but it's Last in Line is slightly dubious here. My favourite song from Last in Line, though, is definitely a difficult one. My mind immediately goes to Egypt, which is a very creatively inspiring song for me. I really like the images that it invokes. But it's definitely not the song I enjoy listening to the most. I would say that probably goes to Eat Your Heart Out, which is a really awesome sort of blend of the more epic elements of Dio and the more like rocker elements, and it's just really cool mesh, and it's just such an enjoyable listen. So yeah, that's probably my favourite song from Last in Line. Next up is Sacred Heart, and this is where things dip a little bit in my opinion. Sacred Heart for me teeters on mediocre, and that's probably not fair, right? It is objectively, right, a much softer album than the other two Dio albums, certainly than the Black Sabbath albums that he did. It's still good, right? It's Dio, it's still good, but for me it's actually one of the few albums that has filler, actually. Something like, Shoot Shoot, it's just kind of a nothing song to me. Sacred Heart itself, as sort of the title track / central epic of the album, is easily the worst for me out of the three first title epics, out of Holy Diver, Last in Line, and Sacred Heart. I think it's the worst. I heard Dio once say it might actually be the best out of those, which I pretty sincerely disagree with. Right, so where was I? Talking down on Sacred Heart. Maybe I should talk it up a little bit. I did say that the title track itself, Sacred Heart, might be the weakest out of the first 3 title track epics, and I believe that. But it is still a very cool song. It's really good, actually. I do like it a lot. It's got some very cool fantasy elements, like literally the line "fight to kill the dragon." Like really, I just enjoy that shit. That's just cool to me, and I love it when songs embrace that. It's got some other really cool elements. I think Fallen Angels has got some interesting elements to it as a song. I do, however, think something like Hungry for Heaven is pop in a way that feels very un-Dio, and something like Rock and Roll Children is very overplayed. It seems to get played a lot at the live shows after this album came out, and I just don't really give a shit about that song. I don't find it to be very good, to be honest. Now I want to quickly have a look at this album, like the composition of it, like what's in it, because I might be forgetting a few things. Another Lie is And Just Another Day, I think, are both songs that have a few cool elements as well. King of Rock and Roll is a good rocker, and Like the Beat of a Heart is awesome. That song slaps so fucking hard. I love it. That's genuinely fantastic. It's up there with, Straight Through the Heart and well, it's out there straight through the heart. I mean, that's good enough, right? It's probably better than that. It almost rivals Invisible for me, actually. So that's got one of my favorite songs on it. There is also another song that sort of gets thrown between the deluxe editions for Sacred Heart and Dream Evil, and that is Hide in the Rainbow, which is, like I said, it sort of gets thrown between the two different deluxe editions. Either way, I would consider it more to be a part of this one, because it's how I first heard it, so that's on obvious bias. But I do really like that song. And I think Sacred Heart, for me, is probably slightly more listenable than something like Rising or Heaven and Hell. Even I don't think there's any song on it that really comes close to Stargazer or Heaven and Hell itself, except maybe Like the Beat of the Heart. I think overall it's probably worse than Mob Rules as well. But I think it's consistent within its own right, and it does have a few pretty bright spots. So I'm going to give it a B. Next up, Dream Evil. Right, this can be interesting. So Dream Evil is one that I, for a while, didn't quite get, I think. You know, I listened to it and I was like, okay, so we got When a Woman Cried, which is sort of almost straight through the heart-esque, or something. Sounds a bit like One Night in the City. Okay, I can appreciate this. And then you sort of have All the Fools Sailed Away, which is sort of this grand, sweeping epic that even has a keyboard solo, which I adore. And I thought, okay, I'll take these two, and I think this is what DIO is to me. But then over the past few months, I've listened to this album more and more, even listening to it while driving, which is dangerous, by the way. And I realised just how awesome it is. Dream Evil is amazing, right? And it's weird because Ronnie sort of said, he calls this sort of a sad album. Although that's not really to do with the quality, that's because at the time he says that the people working on it didn't really like each other. There weren't many people left from the original DIO lineup working on it, and I understand that, but I think sometimes the toughest scenarios can create some of the greatest products. Not that should be the way things are necessarily, but it is a fact of life. And it's a truth about the creative process and the creative industries that oftentimes troubled development brings out something great, and I think it did. And this is what I believe to be one of the most underrated DIO albums, because I think it's pretty awesome through and through. It's generally a lot faster, I think, than any other DIO album. It's a lot of fast tracks, although they're not really rockers. They still invoke sort of the DIO-esque elements, the fantastical elements, and the more somber. It's like a very somber but very rocking album at the same time, and it has this very interesting sound that I just can't get enough of, because it's very easy to headbang to, but when you really listen to it, it's tackling a lot softer issues, and I think some of the melodies are quite soft. There's a lot of keyboards involved as well, which I think helps that and brings it out. And I think obviously this is going towards A. I actually think this is one of the most consistently good DIO albums. I don't think there's a single bad song on this album. I don't think there's a single song that falls below a certain threshold. Some sound very similar. For example, the title track Dream Evil and Night People sort of blend together in my head a little bit. But it's I really like this album. I'm almost tempted to give it an S tier. I just don't think it's a masterpiece in that way. I don't know if it necessarily comes together in that way. Something about Holy Diver feels so deliberate in every song, even in the structure. It's pretty immaculate. I don't think Dream Evil necessarily goes there. But I don't think there's a single bad song on this album, and at the same time, no major bright spots either. It's just pretty much all bright spots, but nothing totally exceptional either. So maybe I'll leave it in A, at least for now. At least until the end. I might change some things at the very end, I'm not sure. Right. Next up, Lock Up the Wolves, the first album with no original DIO lineup members on it, except DIO himself, of course, because otherwise it wouldn't be DIO. Which is why I refute DIO's claim somewhat that DIO isn't a solo project. Obviously, it isn't. For him, it is about the musicians he plays with, and I respect that fact. But to deny that it is less about him than anyone else is wrong. The DIO band is definitely more about Ronnie than anyone else. It's not. I guess it's not a solo project if he doesn't deem it so. But it is his name, and he is the point of it, to be fair. Either way, Lock Up the Wolves, fucking masterpiece. Okay? Lock Up the Wolves might be my favourite album of all time. It easily rivals Holy Diver for me. I think these two are neck and neck. The only problem with Lock Up the Wolves is that it has filler, right? Literally. The average length of these albums is about 9 songs. Lock Up the Wolves has 11. And 2 of those extra 2 can be completely wiped out, right? You have Twisted and Night Music, which are just poor man's versions of Hey Angel. There's no reason for them to exist. Just none. And then you do have Between Two Hearts, which is, to me, a bit lesser than the rest of this album, but it occupies the same slot as something like Shame on the Night from Holy Diver. And this is a case where I don't think that the added on parts of Lock Up the Wolves are doing it any favours when compared to Holy Diver. If anything, they hurt its chances of competing. At the same time, so many songs in this that I love. Why Are They Watching Me is just awesome. Walk on Water, Wild One, fantastic. Lock Up the Wolves is just this crazy, like, hardcore but slow epic. Evil on Queen Street is like a masterclass in like progression towards something really cool. Hey Angel is really great too. My Eyes is just this sort of slightly faster epic that is like a bit Holy Diver-esque. It actually sort of chronicles DIO's career, which I think is really cool. And then Born in the Sun is just something else, man. I love this album so much, man. I do like it more than Holy Diver, actually. Do I think it's better? Maybe. Ronnie said that he thinks it's a fantastic sounding album and it's a very contemporary album, and I agree. It's definitely trying to be a little bit more contemporary, but I still find it to be very DIO. I don't think he's lost himself at all. I think he's actually pretty much at the top of his game in this and in the next album. These sort of years, this sort of period, this album and the next 2 is sort of Ronnie at the top of his game, I think. So yeah, it's staying in it's obviously in S tier. I think I do like it more than Holy Diver, and there's an argument to be made that it's actually better. In terms of picking a favourite track from it, though, that's the thing, I can't, because they're all so good. It's my favourite album. It doesn't need to have a favourite. I can't really pick a favourite track from it. I sort of fluctuate, though, I think. Born on the Sun, though, is a pretty good constant for me, I think. I don't think I'm ever not going to love Born on the Sun. That's such a cool song. Just that rising chords in the chorus. I mean, I love it. My musical terminology isn't great, right? I just have opinions. So yeah, Lock Up the Wolves, masterpiece, might be better than Holy Diver. Look who's next. Dehumanizer, the next Sabbath, because of course DIO returned to Sabbath for a short while, and that sort of ended in disaster as well, because Tony and Geezer, up to the usual tricks. I obviously side with DIO in this scenario, and I don't know if I blame them, but it's not really for me to say. I'm not going to have any impact on this now. I mean, obviously Ronnie's not with us anymore. It doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter. Still. And this another one that DIO called a bit of a sad album, I think. Even though they decided that it was right for them to get back together and make something, he says it was still quite an awkward process of making this album. But I think it was worth it. Dehumanizer is incredible. Easily my favourite non-DIO band, DIO album. Easily. It's amazing. And I only really started to appreciate it recently. I think it's got so... I think it does have a few... I wouldn't say lows. Lows implies that it got like it's a real dip in quality. It has songs that aren't quite as good as the rest, but I think all the songs in this album that are good are masterpieces. All of them. Every song in this album that I like is a 10 out of 10. Buried Alive, Sins of a Father, Computer God... Master of Insanity is what's the word? Just a shining example of what metal should be. It's too good almost. It's crazy. I love this album so much. It's ridiculous. Now I saw someone noting maybe perhaps a mixing problem with this. It's mixed slightly differently, and I noticed this too. Right, there's something about Dehumanizer where it's sort of pretty much every song you notice where it switches between like the chorus and the next part very quickly, and it's almost like that's not normal, but I think it is deliberate. I don't think there's anything about this album that is accidental, and I think it's absolutely fantastic. Dio at the top of his game, despite some of it actually being his most Ozzy-esque performance. I still think this might be some of his best work. And that's the thing. Sins of a Father is... Ronnie's never sounded more like Ozzy than he does on Sins of a Father. And that's my favourite song from this album. So what does that say? I still don't like Ozzy. As a person, really, or as a singer. But, you know, it's Dio. He's got the Midas touch, basically. So, good job on that. It's just got this really cool, like, harsh, mechanical sound, but it's also effervescently, like, musical and thought-provoking, and just badass, too. It's pretty much... It's a weird word to use for me, I think, especially for music, but it's got to be the most badass album I've ever heard. It slaps. I mean, I don't like using these terms too much, but it goes hard. It's fantastic. It's a brilliant album. Teeters on being my favourite. I think I like Lock Up the Wolves and Dehumanizer more than Holy Diver. I just recognise Holy Diver for what it is. So yeah, Dehumanizer, absolutely amazing. Love it. Who's next? I said on Lock Up the Wolves that this and the next two albums represent Roddy at the top of this game, and that's true. Strange Highways is a masterclass in musical engineering. The sound of this album and the sound that they were able to produce are just crazy. Like, it sounds like a machine is making the music, and yet it's a metal album. Like, it's rock. You know, it's purely instrumental, and yet it sounds very machine-like, and it really gets that feeling across so spectacularly, or at the same time, just being an absolute blast to listen to. It's not difficult to listen to. I mean, actually, it does hurt my ears sometimes. It's weird. This album has a tendency to hurt my ears, but I love it so, still. It's one of the... Pain and Blood from a Stone are actually two of the first songs that I heard from Dio. After Don't Talk to Strangers, I heard those two and I thought, this is the shit, right? And yeah, Strange Highways is absolutely fantastic, right? Its title track, that epic, is definitely rivals the others. It's just got... it's so good. Some of them do blend together a little bit, like, for example, something like Hollywood Black and Firehead. Both really great songs, but they are very similar. I think it does have a few songs that don't quite hit for me. But at the same time, it is another 11-track album. Unlike Holy Diver, which is the standard 9. So something like Here's to You or Give Her the Sun could be like the filler. And then Bring Down the Rain could be that Shame of the Night equivalent, although it's a lot better than Shame on the Night. So overall... I do find it... I do not particularly enjoy Give Her the Sun, especially. That sort of falls flat a little bit for me. But the rest is just so damn good. I don't think it's quite as good as Dehumanizer, though. I think Dehumanizer probably did this type of sound better overall. But I do think that this is one of the best Dio albums, and it stands, for me, alongside Last in Line and Dream Evil, as sort of them, not necessarily masterpieces, but really quite close to the top. So I'm going to put it in A. If I had to pick a favourite track, though, a favourite song from Strange Highways. Did I even say Strange Highways at any point? This album is Strange Highways. It would probably be Evolution. I think Evolution is really, really cool. That is an amazing song. It's so bombastic, and you know, it's so bombastic and almost evil sounding, but it doesn't actually do that. It doesn't. It's not like because there's a lot of stuff, say on the Devil You Know album, that's a bit too evil sounding for me. Either way, let's move on. So there are peaks and there are valleys. We just had a peak. Now we're in the valley. What are you doing? Sorry about that. There's only so much I can do. I live with people. I live with my family. Right. There's a sign on the door. The sign on the door that says "Please knock." Barged in. I don't know. What am I supposed to do? I paused the recording obviously as soon as I could, but you know I can't. If someone's going to barge in, I can't stop them from barging in. I also. Sorry. Either way, like I said, there are peaks and valleys, and now we're in the valley. That being Angry Machines, easily the worst album I think that Dio's worked on. It pains me to say. It doesn't pain me to say that. You know, there's always there was bound to be a worst one, and here it is. I really don't like listening to Angry Machines. It's got some bright spots. I think Black is actually genuinely a great song. I also enjoy Institutional Man quite a bit, and I also understand the concept that Dio is going for here. At the same time, I enjoy so little of this album, and even the parts I enjoy I don't quite enjoy enough to really bring it up all that much. I think the most interesting thing about it is This Is Your Life, which is actually, I believe, the only ballad that Dio has done. It's just piano and him singing, and it's really nice. It's actually really nice to listen to. But at the same time, overall, this album doesn't work for me. I don't enjoy listening to it. Unlike something like Long Live Rock and Roll, where I can probably enjoy every song on that album because, you know, it's just very pure and very. It's not trying too hard to be something very particular, and what Angry Machines is trying to be isn't something that I think was ever going to work. It's trying to be a bit too rough and a bit too down, and it doesn't work for me, and I don't think it's what Dio should do. I think his music is meant to be not directly this, but still uplifting in general, and Angry Machines just doesn't. It's not enjoyable to listen to. It doesn't have satisfying melodies. It doesn't have particularly good riffs. The percussion is very spastic, but not in a way that is actually satisfying. He puts in some very cool vocal performances, though, here. Some of the most interesting vocal gymnastics I've heard from Dio, but it doesn't save the album, unfortunately. It might save the next one, though. Magicka is not my favourite by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a lot better than Angry Machines, and conceptually I find it more interesting, that it's actually centred around this fantasy tale that Dio wrote. It's also the saddest album for me, and I think I'll explain why once I've gone through more of my thoughts on its quality. Its quality being pretty good. I think its lows are pretty mushy to me. They're a little bit difficult to enjoy. But I think the good songs are really good. Like Fever Dreams is awesome. It's got some really cool vocal gymnastics for me. Same with Ariel. Which Ariel is a very awesome sort of paced epic. And it's some of the coolest vocals I've heard from Dio in that as well. You have something like Losing My Sanity, which is a very nostalgic fairy tale type melody to it that I absolutely adore. Even Feed My Head kind of goes hard as well. In general, I can't say it's one of my favourites. Like I said, I do think the concept is interesting, very much so, and I think it's got some really cool highs. But it doesn't lift it into the realm of being sort of like something that I'd like to listen to with any kind of frequency, you know. So I think I'm going to put it in C. But the reason why this is such a sad album for me is that there's an interview that Ronnie did I don't know if it was shortly before he died, but I think it was in the same year still, or the year before he died. And he said that when it comes to the band Dio itself, the only things that he really felt like he needed to do with it was Magicka 2 and 3, because that's how he sort of viewed Magicka. It's a story that could actually have a sequel, and even third, so he could make a trilogy of albums. and he saw that as the only thing that he really needed to do to be finished with the Dio band, and it saddens me so deeply that he didn't get to make those. The fact that he passed before, that he passed when he did, he passed in before retiring, and the fact that he had an end in sight is just really upsetting to me. Yeah, either way, it's not a fantastic album, but it's got some pretty cool stuff on it. Killing the Dragon, however, is also a bit of a low for me. And we're entering the modern era now. Magicka was in the year 2000. Killing the Dragon was 2002, so not long before I was born, actually. Only 2 of these albums came out after I was born, so yeah, I'm a young fellow. But yeah, Killing the Dragon, very cool conceptually, and it's got some decent stuff on it, but most of it feels like filler to me. I can't say I'm a fan of this album. I just think that Killing the Dragon itself as a title track, as well as Scream, are actually really amazing songs. The rest of it just doesn't hit for me really at all, which is unfortunate. It's still got Dio fantastic vocals, it's still got, you know, musicians that he trusts in, so you've got great instrumentals. None of it just particularly comes together to create something that interests me, or really just stands out amongst the rest of the amazing stuff that Dio came out with. I don't think those 2 songs either save it all that much, although they're probably comparable for me to the highs of Sacred Heart. I think it would actually be a disservice, I think, to this album to not put those 2 side by side. I think because Like the Beat of a Heart is definitely better than Killing the Dragon or Scream, but Killing the Dragon and Scream is probably better than the rest of the stuff on Sacred Heart that I don't mind. So I think it belongs here. Like I said, I don't think they saved that album, or at least I don't think they bring it up to a level that where I think it's really great. It's just pretty much this standard level of good, just with 2 very bright spots. So I'm pretty satisfied with giving Killing the Dragon a B. Next, though, we go up a little bit, because Master of the Moon, which is the final Dio album that Ronnie made before his death. Yeah, Master of the Moon, or is it Masters of the Moon? I'm not sure. Either way, that title track isn't great. I find it a little bit hard to get into. I think The Man Who Would Be King is also a little bit inaccessible for me. I think Shivers is a pretty cool song, although I can't say I like it all that much. But Master of the Moon does have a selection of other tracks that I find actually genuinely fantastic. One More for the Road has the chance of being the best rocker out of Dio's entire discography. It's really, really cool, and it's got some of the coolest vocal work in it too. End of the World, I love. End of the World is a very cool track. I don't really think I could compare it to anything. It is just a great song. The Eyes is sort of this rhythmic, deep, very heavy track. That's very paced. I wouldn't say maybe not well paced, but it's got pace to it. It's like, it feels like footsteps almost. It's awesome. The Eyes is almost a masterpiece in my opinion. It's so cool, and it progresses to this really escalatory, sort of uplifting, epic sound towards the end, and I just adore it. And I think there's a few other songs like Living the Lie, I Am, and Death by Love that I don't really care for either. But at the same time, In Dreams is also fantastic. So it's got 4 songs that I do think are genuinely great. And I think they're good enough where it actually brings it above the sort of stuff that we got in B tier here. And I am going to put it in A. I think Master of the Moon is definitely on the lower end of A. I think it's just a little bit below Rising. It's definitely worse than the other Dio albums here. But I still think it's got a lot going for it. And the stuff that I like on it, I really do like. So yeah, I'm actually happy to put it in A tier, because I just like it more than the stuff in B tier. I mean, the Mob Rules, after listening to it today, it's still got a chance to sort of lift itself out of that grave almost. Not that B tier is a grave of any kind. Anyway, I actually want to sort of finish, I guess, because next up is So this is interesting because Ronnie actually got back with Black Sabbath for a little bit in the mid 2000s, and they made one album that was called Black Sabbath: The DIO Years, which does have 3 new tracks on it. Obviously, it's not here though, and I don't care all that much about it because it's mostly just stuff from Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. But what they did after that was Dio and the members of Sabbath that were with him at the time actually formed a whole new band called Heaven and Hell, and they only got one album out, which was The Devil You Know, which is a very cool album. It's very heavy, it's got this evil sound. Unfortunately, that's what about it doesn't work for me. It does, however, have some really awesome stuff on it. Some really awesome ideas as well. It feels very classic Dio in the elements it tackles. It's definitely more... In fact, it's a lot more devilish than sort of the more fantastical stuff that Dio did before, like in The Holy Diver. And I respect it for that. It's just its sound. It's not how heavy it is. I actually really like quite heavy music in that way. But it's a little bit too evil sounding, and it's got these sort of evil melodies that don't sit right with me. I find them mostly quite unsatisfying. There are 2 songs, however. Follow the Tears. Follow the Tears is really cool. I think it's got great rhythm to it. It definitely borrows that evil sound from the rest of the album, but it makes it work for it. It works in its favour. It's also got some really cool, like, drink from the cup of human kindness. It's a line that sticks with me. It's like one of the most perfect musical vocal deliveries I've ever heard. I really love that. And Bible Black is one of my favourite songs of all time. It's amazing. Bible Black is such a fucking cool song. It speaks to me in a lot of, like, it's very aesthetically appealing to me, like, as in the aesthetics that it invokes for its sound. And it's just a badass song too. It just hits very hard, and I really enjoy it. And it's much more rhythmic and much less evil sounding than the rest. So I like that one a lot as well. Like I said, the rest of the album doesn't really work for me though, which is makes placing it very difficult, given that it has one of my favourite songs on it. But, you know, like I said, B tier always ends up getting stacked, and I think A tier is a little bit more precious than B tier. But at the same time, I'm not feeling that this should be in C tier, because I think B tier works for me. I'm pretty happy with what's in A and in S. I don't think any of this is going to change. I think, you know, Masters of the Moon could see itself, you know, going down a notch, but at the same time, I think I'm biased given that it was the last Dio album, and it does have some stuff on it that I really like, so I'm going to leave it in A. I'm actually not going to change anything about this, I think. S tier is pretty much perfect for me. We've got classic Dio, we've got Sabbath, and we've got sort of this middle ground between modern and classic Dio, and that works for me. I think A tier is pretty perfect. I think C and D tier is exactly what I thought it would be. B tier is a little bit odd because, of course, we have some masterpieces stored in here, like Heaven and Hell and Stargazer, and songs like Bible Black and like The Beat of a Heart, but at the same time, overall these albums, this is where they place for me. So, my final words, I guess, should be, I hold that I think Dio is the best singer I've ever heard. He's my favourite musical artist ever, certainly. I have no doubt about that. It's just a shame that he can't do any more, because he showed no signs of dipping in terms of his vocal quality, certainly. I mean, The Devil You Know is it's crazy. I mean, Dehumanizer wasn't even that... I mean, it's fairly old. I mean, it's sort of this middle ground between modern and old, but, you know, he's pouring his heart and soul into that one. It almost sounds like he's hurting himself on that. And he's not an old man. He's far from an old man in that one as well. I mean, it's just... I just appreciate Dio so goddamn much. I mean, you know, and there's nothing wrong with him having a lesser album or a few lesser albums, and there's nothing wrong with thinking that a few of these albums really do rise above the rest, because it's just how it is. Musicians have highs and lows, and Dio's highs are some of the highest highs, and Dio's average is better than most people's highs, I think. I can't deny I'm slightly smug fan of Dio. I'm quite proud. I don't think really anyone, can compete in a lot of ways. Either way, yeah, this was a very odd video for me to make. I know, not odd for me, odd for the channel, right? Because, like I said, Dio is my favourite musician, and my favourite band. The Dio band is my favourite band, and Dio himself is my favourite singer. So it's not odd for me. It's very misplaced on the channel. I know that, but I still felt compelled to make it, and I had an opportunity to make it, so I did. And I hope you enjoyed. This is my ranking of Ronnie James Dio's studio discography. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this, please make sure to like and subscribe. If you're here because of Dio, maybe check out other content. You might like Deep Rock Galactic. If you do play video games at all, you might not. If you're a Dio fan, but if you do, you might like Deep Rock. It's what we mostly talk about on the channel. It's pretty much all we talk about on the channel. And if you liked it, just like and feel free to subscribe. Ignore our videos if you want, but subscribing helps. So we've got a goal and we want to reach it, and we appreciate everyone who subscribes, even if they don't watch our videos. We appreciate everyone who watches our videos, even if they don't subscribe. But I humbly ask that you, I humbly hope that you do subscribe, and that you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. This is Harry from Barrel Vision, signing out. Thank you.